Hey, Chris, did you have Hardin wear those shoes there on Thursday? Did you have Hardin wear those shoes on Thursday?
Is the witness available? Yes. You may have a seat, sir. Mr. Shellhorn, are we ready?
Oh, yes, Your Honor, I'm sorry. Just getting some evidence or whatnot.
Yeah, we're going to address that now.
Before the jury comes in.
Yeah, before the jury comes in. Mr. Hardin, before we bring the jury in, it did come to my attention that when the last witness was testifying.
Judge, do you want this on the record?
Yes.
On the record.
Fine. Mr. Hardin, before we proceed with the jury, it's come to my attention that before you testified, when the last witness, Ms. Gray, was testifying, you may have overheard some of that testimony from the people filming the proceedings. Is that accurate?
I could overhear some of it coming from outside the doors when I was sitting outside.
Outside these doors or
Yes.
where it was being recorded?
Both, but sitting right there, I could overhear some of what was not muffled, but some of what was coming out.
Okay. All right. Were you able to make out any of the specifics of the?
No, because I could only hear bits and pieces.
Fine. And you were seated at the, there were tables outside in the
Yes.
hallway? Okay. That's where you were seated?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Any follow-up?
No, thank you, Judge.
All right,
I see no problem, Judge.
all right. Maybe we'll have to keep our voices down then. Or have the witnesses, have your
Somebody
detective.
referring to me, Judge.
I was just.
I was not, I was looking at Mr. Shellhorn when I
know,
said
but I
that.
saw like you're.
I was looking at Mr. Shellhorn and I said a collective we. Is there any other, I know this room where we normally put witnesses is being used by the news crew. There is a bench at this end. I think in the future, any state's witnesses should be seated down there and not right outside the courtroom.
Judge, the detective indicated to me he understands that.
All right, thank you, Detective. Thank you, Mr. Hart. All right, we'll bring the jurors in. Mr. Horn, traditionally you just stay in the consent. Normally a witness is called in after, but since we're continuing, thank you.
Okay.
All right, be seated, everyone. We'll continue with Mr. Hardin's testimony. Go ahead, Mr. Shellhorn.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And that last objection was addressed by the court at the break, and the objection was overruled. So, go ahead, Mr. Shellhorn.
Mr. Hardin, I apologize if I already asked you these questions before the break, so I'll ask it again. Do you know who George Morris is?
I do.
Who is George Morris?
He is a very famous American show jumper and coach of the American team.
And approximately, well, have you ever met him?
Yes,
Do you know if Michael Barisone knows him?
yes,
Had you ever had any discussions with the defendant, Michael Barisone, about George Morris and his teaching philosophies and those sorts of things?
yes,
Are you aware whether the defendant and Mr. Morris were friendly with one another?
they were.
Now, I think I had asked you a question about whether you were familiar with the August 5th, 2019 punishment that Safe Sport handed down to Mr. Morris. Are you familiar with that?
Yes,
And I'm not going to ask you any specifics about the allegations or findings or anything, but are you aware of what the punishment that he received was?
yes.
What was that?
Lifetime ban.
And is that information something that was very well known or not very well known in the equestrian community?
Very well known.
Do you recall if you and the defendant, Mr. Barisone, ever discussed that when it happened on August 5th or in the days leading after?
We did.
Now, I want to draw your attention to the summer of 2019. You were living and working here at the New Jersey farm during that summer?
Yes.
And you indicated that you had lived on the second floor apartment of the farmhouse for a number of years before that summer, correct?
Yes.
Was there some different living situation in the summer of 2019?
Yes.
Where were you living in the summer of 2019?
I was staying in a temporary situation at the stables.
Now, are you personally aware of anything that had happened at the farmhouse that affected parts of the farmhouse?
Yes.
What are you aware of?
There was a flooding at the house the winter prior.
And did you have a chance to, at some point when you came back to New Jersey, go into the farmhouse or see what some of the damages were?
Yes.
What parts of the farmhouse were damaged to your memory?
The ceiling on the first floor and most of the first floor was damaged.
How was the state of the basement?
Fairly damaged.
Was it damaged to the extent where the working students couldn't live there that summer?
Yes.
Now, was that part of the reason why you weren't living in the second floor apartment that summer?
Yes.
And who was living in that apartment that summer?
Pardon me, which apartment?
Who was living in the second floor apartment during the summer of 2019?
Lauren and her boyfriend Rob.
And in case I didn't ask you at the beginning of the direct examination, who is Lauren?
Lauren Kanarek.
And who's Rob?
Robert Goodwin.
Now, was it your decision to move out of that apartment?
No.
How did you feel about moving out of that apartment?
Objection, relevance.
What's the relevance of it?
Judge, I think as we've talked about, it goes to the state of mind of individuals at the barn and whether or not that had any impact on the defendant.
I don't think Mr. Hardin's state of mind is an issue in this case, so I'll sustain the objection.
With respect to Lauren Kanarek, what was your knowledge of her involvement and presence at the farm?
She was there to train.
Are you aware if she owned any horses?
Yes.
And do you recall how many horses she had?
To my recollection, she started with 3.
Were those horses, and when you reference 3, would that be, to the best of your recollection, horses that were boarded at the farm?
When she started, and then that number increased over her time there.
Did you have any professional or working relationship with her?
Yes.
And what was that?
There were certain times during her time there that I would help her with her horses.
And you indicated earlier an individual named Rob Goodwin?
Yes.
Who was Rob Goodwin with respect to Lauren Kanarek?
Her boyfriend, fiancé.
Did you have any sort of a professional relationship with Rob?
Only to the extent that he would assist her with the horses.
Do you remember approximately when they first started working with Michael Barisone, or when they first came to one of his farms?
To the best of my memory, it was the spring of 2018.
And during the course of time that they were boarding horses and training with Michael Barisone, what was the nature of your personal or social relationship with either of them?
It varied over time.
Meaning what? Just in general.
Meaning there were times where we were quite social, and times where we had no social interaction.
Did you have any direct or specific knowledge of the agreement that Ms. Kanarek or Mr. Goodwin had with the defendant?
I had a general.
And what was your general?
Objection, hearsay.
I think he can testify based on his observations, Judge.
Well, if it's his personal observations,
Yes.
not what he heard from someone else.
No, I'm trying to elicit that he didn't, I think he said he didn't have direct or specific knowledge, so I'm gonna ask him his observations.
Right. As long as it's crouched in those terms.
So you indicated that you knew that Ms. Kanarek had a number of horses boarded at the farm?
Yes.
And also, I think you indicated that she was there to train?
Yes.
Would that have been for herself as a rider, for her horses, or a combination of the two?
A combination.
Are you aware of whether or not Ms. Kanarek was paying any money to the defendant with respect to those services?
That question goes to your own personal knowledge, not what you may have heard from someone else. Did you have any personal knowledge of that fact?
It is my understanding that she was.
And you indicated that Ms. Kanarek and Mr. Goodwin were living in the farmhouse that summer of 2019?
Yes.
Do you have any personal knowledge of the circumstances of them coming to live there?
Coming to live at the apartment or at the farm?
Were you a party or were you part of any conversations about what led to them living at the farm?
Well, hold on,
Objection.
hold on. Were you part of any negotiations yourself with regard to Ms. Kanarek and Mr. Goodwin staying at the farm?
No.
That's the answer I
So,
expected.
so any information you have about it came from other sources other than your personal knowledge and
Yes.
interactions?
Yes.
All right. All right, move on, Mr. Shellhorn.
You indicated that your relationship with them fluctuated.
Yes.
What was the state of your working or professional relationship with Lauren Kanarek in August of 2019?
Could you repeat the question?
What was the state of your working or professional relationship with Lauren Kanarek in this August of 2019?
At that time, I was not helping her with her horses or her riding.
And are you aware from living at the property, how would you describe the state of things at the property in August of 2019?
Extremely tense.
Now, I think you indicated that the working students were not living at the farmhouse that summer,
Correct.
and you may have already answered this, I apologize. Where were they living?
They were living in various locations around the stables or the club room of the farm.
Do you know whether Michael Barisone and Mary Haskins Gray were living together during that summer?
They were
Do you know where they were living, at least at the beginning of that summer season?
also in the farmhouse on the farm.
Do you know what living area they were living in?
To the best of my recollection, the main floor.
Are you aware whether at some point they moved out of that house?
Yes.
Do you know where they went?
They went also to the stables, the barn.
Do you recall if anyone else was staying at the barn who didn't live there on a more regular basis at the beginning of August 2019?
Richard Gray,
Who did you know that to be?
the father of Mary Haskins Gray.
Had Ruth Cox ever come back to the farm?
Yes.
And are you aware whether she was there on an overnight basis at some point during August 2019?
She was.
Are you aware whether Michael Barisone ever met with a lawyer during August of 2019?
Yes.
Were you present for any of those meetings?
No.
During the course of time that Lauren Kanarek and Rob Goodwin were at the farm, meaning either New Jersey or Florida, did you ever hear Lauren Kanarek make any direct threats of violence to Michael Barison?
No.
Did you ever hear Robert Goodwin make any direct threats of violence to Michael Barison?
No.
Working with the defendant, Michael Barisone, for the number of years that you did you ever see or hear him lose his temper?
Yes.
And what would a typical reaction be if he lost his temper?
Be very vocal.
I want to draw your attention to Wednesday of August 7th. Do you recall what you were doing that day? Specifically in the early afternoon.
I was working horses, riding,
Do you recall where you were doing that?
in the covered arena on the farm.
Do you recall if you spoke or interacted with Michael Barisone at all that day?
Earlier in the day.
Do you recall generally what his demeanor was?
Out of his mind.
Do you recall speaking to him at all or interacting with him that afternoon?
No.
Did you see him yelling or otherwise carrying on that day?
I did not.
Did you hear or see him running around the farm or the clubhouse or the barn?
I did not.
Up until the events of the middle of the afternoon on August 7th, would you say that that was more or less an ordinary day at the farm in terms of your day-to-day work?
For me, yes.
Now, at some point on August 7th, did you become aware that police were at the property?
I did.
Do you recall, in general, how you became aware of that?
I believe I saw lights first over the hill.
Now, do you have any personal knowledge of what occurred at the farmhouse that afternoon?
I do not.
And do you still have any ongoing business with Michael Barison?
I still operate a portion of my business from his farm in Florida.
Judge, I don't have any further questions for Mr. Hardin. Thank you.
All right, cross-examination.
Mr. Harden, when Lauren Kanarek and her boyfriend, Robert Goodwin, first came to the property, you were very friendly with them, correct?
Correct.
You even socialized with them, correct?
Correct.
And can I assume that that relationship changed at some point?
Yes.
Was Lauren Kanarek causing problems at Barison Dressage?
Yes.
Was she creating a toxic environment based on your personal observations?
Yes.
You indicated that you were training her when she first joined.
I believe it wasn't when she first joined.
Okay, where at some
But
point
some point, yes.
you started training her. And did she always show up to her lessons?
No.
Did she come at late hours to the barn or stable area after hours?
She had.
And did that create a problem to all the people that were living in that area?
It did. It did.
And were you aware of the social media posts being posted by Lauren Kanarek?
I was.
And how did those social media posts affect Michael Barison?
Judge, I'm going to object to the form of the question.
Judge, I'll rephrase it.
Yeah, why don't you rephrase it?
You were aware that Lauren Kanarek was posting things on social media, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever talk to Michael Barisone about those? Not specifically, did you have a discussion regarding them?
Just answer yes or no.
Yes.
And what effect did you observe with respect to Michael Barisone with respect to those?
They made him extremely paranoid and fearful for the farm and everything on it.
Now, you indicated on direct that he was living in the farmhouse underneath Kanarek and Goodwin.
Yes.
At some point of time, he moved out of there and started living, not in his house, but in the club area, in the stables, correct?
Yes.
Did you have a discussion with him regarding that move?
Yes.
And can you tell me what effect you observed with respect to Michael Barisone after that incident?
He was too fearful to be in his own home.
That's based on your observations?
Yes.
He physically showed what you recognized as fear, correct?
Yes.
Now, this woman Cox that the prosecutor referred to, did you have discussions with her with regards to what was going on?
Yes.
Did you observe fear in
Objection.
her?
What's the basis for the objection?
The ongoing objection, Judge, the state of mind of other individuals is not relevant. I think you've made that ruling a number of times.
What's the relevance of Cox's state of mind? Isn't the issue Mr. Barisone?
The judge shows the overall toxic environment that affected everyone. And if it affects Cox, obviously would affect Mr. Barisone more because he's the owner.
Let's not get into that, Mr. Balinkas. That's not a proper comment. I'll allow the question and answer.
Did you observe fear in Mrs. Cox?
Yes.
Was she sleeping in the stables in front of her horse because of that fear?
Well, hold on a second. Now that's going a little too far, Mr. Balinkas. You're asking him to opine on why she was doing something. That's not within his province. If he saw her sleeping there, he can say, I saw her sleeping there and when that happened, but not the reasons. That's something internal to her.
Did you see Miss Cox sleeping in her stalls in front of her horse?
Yes.
Now,
I
I'm
did.
not going to ask you what the content was, but did you have a discussion with her with regards to that?
Just answer yes or no. Did you have a discussion with
Yes.
Ms. Cox? All right, he did. Next question.
Now, that safe in the office, you indicated that you occasionally had access to it.
Yes.
Was the safe ever left open,
No.
to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Did you ever see Mary Haskins go into that safe?
Yes.
Do you know how she got the combination to that safe?
No.
Now, the prosecutor showed you pictures of the stable area where the horses are housed. Is there a rubber floor in that area?
Yes.
And what's the purpose of that?
So the horses don't slip on the concrete.
Now, you indicated that it was your understanding that, strike that. To your knowledge, was Lauren Kanarek paying for her living accommodations?
Hold on. Wasn't that objected to when,
I asked that question and it was objected to.
And you allowed him to answer it, I believe, Judge.
generally speaking, yes? Not details.
I'll move on, Judge. Was Lauren Kanarek the only client on the property that was living there full-time?
Yes.
Did you find that unusual?
It was not normal.
Now, you indicated that in August of 2019, that it was extremely tense at Barisone Dressage, correct?
Yes.
And was it tense because of Kanarek and Goodwin?
Yes.
You indicated that Mary Gray's father came up. Do you know why he came up?
From personal knowledge, not from what other people told you?
She wanted him there to feel, so she felt safer.
You were at the stables the morning of the 7th, correct?
Yes.
Was there a incident between Robert Goodwin and the blacksmith or furrier on that morning?
Yes.
And I'm not going to ask you what, were any statements made that you're aware of by Robert Goodwin?
Yes.
Now, you indicated that when Michael Barison loses his temper, he becomes vocal.
Yes.
Raises his voice, correct?
Yes.
Maybe yells a little bit, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever seen him get physical?
Absolutely not.
Now, leading up to the days of the shooting, did you see a significant mental decline in Michael Barison?
Objection.
He can't testify about that, Mr. Belenkus. He's not an expert witness.
Can you describe your observations of Michael Barison, say for the last 2 or 3 days prior to the shooting?
I would say he was in an almost catatonic state. Hadn't been sleeping, eating, glazed over look in his eyes, just a zombie.
Bathing,
No.
shaving,
No.
was he walking the property at night, to your knowledge?
Yes.
Did you see that yourself, in other words? Not
Yes.
what you heard, you saw it yourself?
Yes.
All right, very good.
Was he despondent?
Explain, sorry.
Despondent, depressed?
Extremely.
Was he able to perform the everyday functions normally associated with running his business?
No. The first time in 18 years I had seen him that way.
Did he cancel clinics?
Yes.
Did he show up to ride when he normally did?
No.
Did he withdraw?
Absolutely.
Were you concerned about him based on your observations?
100%.
I have nothing further.
All right, any redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Hardin, from having known Mr. Barisone for the length of time that you did, would it be fair to say that he did have other emotional or mental struggles during the time you knew him with, for example, anxiety?
Yes.
And that existed before he met Ms. Kanarek?
Yes.
He also had issues with depression,
Yes.
and that existed before he met her?
Yes.
Nothing further, Judge.
All right, you may,
Just one more question?
based on that?
Yes, absolutely. The observations of depression and anxiety that you observed on prior occasions, were these observations leading up to the day of the shooting much, much worse?
Extremely worse.
All right, you may step down. Thank you.
Judge, may I look out in the hall and just make sure the next witness is here?
Sure.
Your Honor, the state will next call Ruth Cox.
Ruth Cox, watch your step, please. Step up to the table, be sworn in. Okay?
Good afternoon, Ms. Cox. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Please remain standing for a moment. If you could place your left hand on the Bible, please. Raise your right hand. My court clerk will administer an oath to you.
Do you swear in the presence of Almighty God that the testimony you give to this court regarding this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Ruth Cox. My last name is C-O-X.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Cox, you may have a seat.
Thank you.
All right. Please keep your voice up nice and loud so we have jurors in the jury box and also in the first two rows in the gallery.
Okay.
That microphone just records, doesn't amplify your voice.
Okay.
So keep your voice up.
But if I'm not speaking loud enough, please let me know.
All right, and jurors, if you don't hear anything, please just raise your hand and we'll have the witness raise her voice a little bit. And if you don't understand a question, Ms. Cox, posed by one of the attorneys or the court, if I happen to ask a question,
sir.
just indicate you don't understand, that's fine. I don't want you answering a question if you don't understand it.
Thank you,
Okay?
Jim.
All right, very good. Go ahead,
Thank
Mr. Shellhorn.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury and tell them where you live?
Yes, you want me to give my name again?
If you would.
Okay, Dr. Ruth Cox, and I live in New Bern, North Carolina.
And Dr. Cox, do you know Michael Barison?
Yes, sir, I do.
Do you see him in court today?
Yes, sir.
Would you identify him by an article of clothing he's wearing?
A dark colored tie.
She's identified by crime.
All right, for the record, Ms. Cox has identified the defendant, Mr. Barisone.
Dr. Cox, do you also know an individual or know of an individual named Lauren Kanarek?
I do.
And do you know her through your association with Michael Barisone?
I do.
Approximately how many times would you say that you've ever interacted with her?
Maybe 3 times.
Do you know an individual named Robert Goodwin?
Yes.
And do you know of him through your association with Michael Barison?
Yes.
I want to direct your attention back to August of 2019. Were you in New Jersey at the beginning of the month of August 2019?
I was.
Specifically, do you recall where you were?
You mean at his stables? Is that the question you're asking me?
Where were you staying?
I was staying at his stables. Yes, sir.
Meaning the defendant, Michael Barison?
Yes, Michael Barison's stables. Yes, sir.
Do you recall where that stable is located?
In Long Valley.
And on August 4th or August 5th, were you having a conversation with the defendant in the stables on that property?
Yes, sir, I was.
Did he ask you for something?
Yes, sir.
What did he ask you for?
He wanted to see a gun that I had in my car.
Do you recall what kind of gun that was?
It is a 9mm Ruger. It's a small pistol.
And do you recall what color or coloring it was?
Yes, sir. The bottom part of it is pinkish in color, like pink camo. If camo, do you know what I mean? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Short for camouflage? Camo?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Camouflage. Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Shellhorn.
Thank you, Doctor. Did he take that handgun from you during the course of that conversation?
Yes, sir. He did.
And on August 7th of 2019, are you aware that an incident occurred at the farmhouse on that property?
Yes, sir. I am.
Do you have any personal knowledge of that? Of what happened outside the farmhouse?
I was not present to it. I know that there was a shooting.
Did you come to find that out after the fact?
Yes, after the fact. Yes, sir.
Meaning you didn't witness what actually happened?
Absolutely not.
Now, at some point on August 7th, were you still at the stable and the clubhouse when the police came?
Yes, sir. I was.
And did you have a conversation with them, or were you interviewed by the police on that day?
Yes, sir. I was. That afternoon and that evening.
And did you come to find out at some point after the shooting that that handgun that you gave to the defendant had been recovered by the police on the property?
Unfortunately, sir, I did.
Dr. Cox, I want to ask you some questions about that weapon. Were you charged with a crime related to that firearm?
Yes, sir, I was.
Do you recall what the specific charge was that you were charged with?
I don't know the legal terms that you would use, but I'm sure that you could tell me, but it had to do with bringing a weapon into your state.
And did it also have to do with unlawfully transferring it to another person?
Yes, sir, it did.
Now, do you recall appearing before Judge Taylor on December 13th, 2021 on a Zoom or a virtual hearing?
Yes, sir, I did.
And do you recall, let me rephrase that question. Were you represented by an attorney?
Yes, sir, I was.
Do you recall what the purpose of that hearing on December 13th was?
Yes, the purpose was to be put on a program, a pretrial intervention program.
And what is your understanding of what pretrial intervention is?
It's a, I'm not going to use legal terms because I don't know all the legal terms. But it is a type of probation in which I will respond to a probation officer, which I have come to make contact with, and I will follow all the rules and regulations that I'm asked to do according to all the documents that I signed related to that.
Now, do you recall what the maximum punishment you could have gotten if you didn't enter into PTI was for that crime?
I think according to your laws, I could have gotten 18 months in jail.
And what was the period of supervision or probationary supervision that you were given as part of the PTI?
36 months.
Have you been compliant with the supervision at this point?
Absolutely, sir, I have.
Did you go over the PTI order that was signed by you and me and Judge Taylor?
Yes, sir.
And that was also signed by your lawyer?
Yes, sir.
And did that also require you to forfeit or surrender the firearm that we were just discussing?
Yes, sir.
Have you met with me and other members of my office at times over Zoom or Teams or something like that?
Yes, sir.
And at times, was your attorney present for some of those meetings?
Yes, sir.
Now, I want to draw your attention back to Michael Barisone. Can you tell the jury approximately when it is that you first met him?
I met him about 5 years before the incident happened down in New Bern, North Carolina.
And do you recall what the circumstances of that meeting were in New Bern?
Yes, sir. I owned a horse with Mary Haskins Gray, and we were looking for someone to help us with this horse because we thought he had great potential. Mary Haskins had known Michael and thought that he would be helpful to us, and she had asked him to come down there to a horse clinic where there would be multiple lessons that he would give. And as you know, he's an Olympian and a very good horseman, and people would be interested to come and take lessons from him, and that's how I first met him.
Over time, did you get to know him better?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you also enter into a co-ownership agreement of a horse with him?
Yes, sir, I did.
What was the horse that you owned together with the defendant?
It was a foal named Lady Guardian.
And I'm sure everybody buys horses for different reasons. What's the reason that you would buy a horse or invest in a horse?
We thought this horse would have a potential for dressage, and Mary Haskins would be the person who would be his rider.
And did you have any feelings about Michael Barisone being the trainer of that horse?
I had positive feelings about that, yes, sir.
Over the course of time that you knew the defendant and you entered into some of these business arrangements with him, did your relationship with him move beyond just business and become more of a friendship?
Yes, sir.
Now, I think you indicated that you owned a horse or horses with Mary Haskins Gray.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall how many horses you owned with her?
2.
What were the names of those horses?
Don Devone was one horse, and Jolena was the second horse.
Did you own any other horses besides Don Devone, Jolena, or Lady Guardian?
No, sir.
Where were those horses boarded?
They were boarded at Michael Barisone's stables.
Did you pay Mr. Barisone with respect to the boarding?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you pay him as well for training the horses?
Yes, sir.
Now, I think you indicated already that you are familiar with the Long Valley Farm.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with whether or not Michael Barisone owns another stable or farm elsewhere?
Yes, sir.
Where is that?
Waxahachie, Florida.
And did you have an opportunity during the course of your relationship with Michael Barisone to visit both of those farms at
Yes.
times?
Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say those visits went from being strictly business to being business and personal or social?
Yes.
Did you ever stay overnight in New Jersey when you came to visit?
Yes, sir.
Where would you typically stay if there was a typical place?
Well, I would stay somewhere on the farm. There were different opportunities for places for me to spend the night, so I would usually stay on the farm at some place. It would change from time to time.
Can you generally describe for the jury, they've already seen some diagrams of the property, but what's your recollection of the general layout or some of the features of the property?
It's a lovely piece of property. From the road, there's a hill that goes up to the top, obviously, of the hill. There's a historic house that's there that's several stories high, which he restored. Up at the top, on the other side of the hill, there's a large horse complex that includes a club room, and behind that club room, there's a lovely indoor arena. To the left of that club room, there is a garage in which Michael had his cars. He loved antique cars. To the right, there was a long stables that came to the right. Behind all of that, there was another small stables over there. And you went down the hill on the other side, and below that was where the young stock was kept. And there was a small stable down there that was used for feeding them and giving them hay. And there were several outdoor paddocks, and there was also an outdoor dressage arena over to the right.
Now, you indicated that if you're driving on the driveway, that you would come up to a rise or a hill. If you went over the hill to where the stables and the clubhouse and that sort of thing are, could you see to the farmhouse?
You could see the upper part of the farmhouse. Yes, I mean, it was like 3 stories high, so you could see the upper part of the farmhouse. Yes, sir.
Now, you described a little bit about the layout of the stable and the club room. What are some of your distinctive memories of the club room area?
The club room had a very long table in the middle of it. It had furniture that you could sit and look out from the club room into the dressage arena, which was a very nice thing, particularly when it got chillier. There was a kitchen. Very often there were parties in there, like just an example, July the 4th, we usually had a cookout. There was a porch on the front as you walked into the club room. So there were various social activities that would happen in that club room.
What kind of things do you remember would be hanging on the walls in that club room?
There was memorability that Michael had from his various years in his horse world. There were various championship ribbons that he had. There were letters from people that he had helped in the horse world, thanking him for helping him on the walls.
Now, when you weren't at the property or weren't at one of the farms, how frequently would you communicate with the defendant?
I did not communicate. I was just trying to think on how to answer that. I did not communicate with him very often. I more, because Mary Haskins was at later living up there, I would more communicate with her.
Now, what was your experience, or let me ask you some questions about your experience related to the business that Michael Barisone was running. Do you know how many different stalls there were at the New Jersey farm for horses, for example?
I never counted. I'm
You
gonna
can give an estimate.
Okay, I'm gonna say 20 plus.
And what was your experience with the number of horses that may be in those stalls?
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
In other words, were the stalls typically more full, more empty, or something in the middle?
Oh, absolutely more full. He had some of his horses, and he had a lot of horses like mine who he had clients for, so it was mainly full.
Are you aware whether he had any employees or people working for him?
Yes, sir.
What was your understanding of that?
He had a gentleman who mucked out the stalls in the morning, and he usually had 1 or 2 working students.
What did you know the working students to do based on your observations or what you saw?
They would groom the horses, they would get the horses tacked up and saddled to be ridden, and there was a constant exchange of horses between, when Michael was there, between Michael, between Mary Haskins, and between Justin, and so the working students took care of that. They also took care of the feeding.
Now, you introduced yourself as a doctor.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about your own professional experience and what you do for a living?
Okay, do you want me to talk about the degrees that I hold? Is that what you're asking me to do?
What's your background in education?
Okay. All right, so I hold a diploma degree in nursing, which is a 3-year degree. I have a Bachelor of Science in nursing. I have a Master's of Science in Psych Mental Health Nursing. I have a PhD degree in Marriage and Family Therapy. And I am a family nurse practitioner and a psych mental health practitioner.
And in a nutshell, what do you do now? What is your occupation now? What's your practice entail?
Okay, so in the town that I live in, I work for several different agencies there, doing medication management and also doing individual and family therapy.
Were you ever engaged in a formal professional relationship based on your position with Michael Barisone?
No, sir, I was not.
Did you ever interact with him in that regard on a personal or a friendly level?
Please ask that question in a different way.
Did you ever interact with him or have any dealings with him on a personal level that drew on your professional background?
Yes.
Based on the period of time that you knew the defendant, did you ever observe anything when you were with him related to his running the business?
Yes, sir.
And what might that be?
I observed how he managed his time, how he managed his clinics, his buying of selling of hay, his interest in different types of feed, those type things.
Did you ever have any observations or even talk to him with regard to any concerns he had about his finances or about the financial aspects of running a business?
We discussed that at times because he was always very cognizant of being able to fund this large organization, which is he alone was funding. So, yes, we discussed that at times.
That sort of leads into my next question, set of questions, which is about how expensive it can be to own a horse.
How much do you want to spend?
Well, what are some factors that could affect how much a horse costs to buy?
Well, the factors would be their breeding, would be how you want to use this horse. If you just want a horse that you can trail ride, then you're not looking at a real expensive horse. The kinds of horses that were there at those stables, the kind of horses that myself and MH were interested in were much, much higher priced horses that we were looking forward to doing the top level dressage national and international competition.
And what are some of the ongoing expenses that you may have after you buy the horse?
Oh, buying the horse was just the simple thing. So then you have feed, you have hay, you have watering, you have farrier bills, you have vet bills, you have tack, you have boarding if you're going to boarding somewhere, you have training, you need a trailer, you need a truck. Does that help you?
Is that just the tip of the iceberg?
Yeah, that's why I'm smiling, yes.
Now, you indicated that your purpose in wanting to buy those horses and your aspirations with the horses was to get them to the highest levels if possible.
Absolutely.
What role or effect does a trainer have in trying to accomplish a goal like that?
Oh, the trainer has a lot of responsibility in terms of their understanding of what it takes to do that, both for the horse and for the rider, and the experience that they had to be able to do that.
And based on your experience in the equestrian industry, similar to how you said if you have aspirations for a horse, it may cost more. Does it cost more for a better trainer?
Oh, absolutely, yes, sir.
Where would you, or how would you evaluate the defendant as a trainer based on your observations?
Exceptional.
Now, I want to direct your attention and ask you some questions about the gun. You mentioned earlier about owning a gun. And can you remind the jury what kind of a gun that was?
It was a 9mm Ruger, very small handgun.
Do you remember when you bought that gun? Approximately.
Sometime in the beginning of 2016.
And do you recall where you purchased it, what state?
No, sir, I do not.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in North Carolina.
And can you describe for the jury what were some of the steps that you had to take in order to be able to purchase the gun?
Yes, sir. The gun that I was looking for was very difficult to find because it was a small gun, so I went on the internet and called and contacted various dealers, pawn shops, and it ended up that this gun came from, I can tell you, somewhere in the Midwest. It was sent from there to a pawn shop in New Bern.
Now, did you just find the gun, order it online, and then walk into the pawn shop in New Bern and pick it up?
I did go in and pick it up, but I had to sign for it.
Did you have to do any other paperwork or go through any sort of checks or anything like that, an application process in order to buy the gun?
Yeah, yes, sir, I did. In North Carolina, you can have a concealed carry permit, and in North Carolina, for that, you have to go to a class for that. Then you have to go through the sheriff's department to apply for the concealed carry permit. I had to be fingerprint printed. I had to fill out various forms. Right now, I don't remember how many, but it just wasn't one or two. And then you had to have background checks done, both in the criminal system and in the mental health system.
And after all that comes back, is that when you get some sort of a permit and you're allowed to go pick up the gun?
Yes, sir.
Now, you indicated that you wanted to purchase this particular gun. What was the reason you wanted to buy this specific gun?
I have a very small hand, very small fingers, so I needed a gun that had a very small grip.
What was the reason that you bought the gun?
I was going to do target shooting. I have some friends that have guns, and so we were interested in doing that together.
Did you ever travel with the gun?
At times I did, yes.
And specifically, did you ever travel with the gun when you would come up from New Bern to the Long Valley Farm?
I did at times due to safety issues because I would leave New Bern after work in the afternoon, and there is no straight way to drive from New Bern to Long Valley, so you have to, in 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm driving through the countryside in the dark, and so at times when that would be happening, yes, I would have that with me.
What's the approximate amount of time it would take you to drive from New Bern to Long Valley?
Between 11 and 12 hours.
Did you ever take the gun with you when you would go down to the farm in Loxahatchee?
No, sir, I did not.
Can you tell the jury when you would travel with the gun, how would you transport it?
So the gun itself was transported with in the clip with a plastic clip in the magazine that came with the gun. So the gun was not loaded. The gun was in a pouch by itself. I had a truck at that time, and so we were taught in our course that the best place to put the gun is in the trunk of your car. And since I do not have a trunk in the car, it was in the back seat on the passenger side against the door in the back seat, which would be the farthest away, you know, for me to, if I wanted to try and get it, I could not reach it.
Now, you indicated that you would keep that orange plastic magazine inside the gun.
Yes, sir?
Did the gun come with any other magazines to put bullets into?
Yes, sir, it came with one.
How many did you typically have with the gun?
2.
Did the gun have any sort of a case or anything else
You mean when I bought it?
when you bought it?
No, it did not come in a case.
Did you buy a case for it?
Yes, sir, I did.
What kind of case did you buy?
It was a material plastic case that had a zipper, and the inside had like velvet material, you know, crushed material for the gun, and a pocket for the gun. On the outside, there was a zipper for the magazines.
Now, Judge, if I could approach.
Certainly.
Judge, for the record, I'm going to hand forward S-177. I believe that's already in evidence.
It is.
S-181 already in evidence. S-202 in evidence, and S-178, which is not yet in evidence, but I would like to offer it at this time.
What number, counsel?
178.
I have no objection to that, Judge.
All right, 170, it's 179 that hasn't been admitted yet?
178, Your Honor.
178. All right, 178 is admitted into evidence. The other items are already in evidence.
Dr. Cox, if we could start with the white box there that should have a red sticker on it that says S-177.
Yes, sir?
Can you open that up, please? And from looking at that, what is it?
It's a Ruger pistol.
And is that the same Ruger pistol that you purchased back sometime in 2016?
If it's the same serial number, yes, sir, it is.
Can you see the serial number there?
Yes, I can.
Is that the same serial number, or do you want to look at something to refresh your memory?
I don't have that number in my mind, but I know that you all checked it out.
Well, just for purposes of the record, I'm going to show you, I think it's S-173.
Judge, I'll stipulate that's her gun. That's
Right.
it.
What? Parties are stipulating that the serial number on that gun matches the record, so it is, in fact, your gun. The parties have stipulated to that,
And
right?
the
It just-
answer is, yes, sir, it is my gun.
Mr. Shellhorn, did you catch the witness's answer? She did acknowledge that that was, in fact, her gun.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, very good. Move on. Next question.
Dr. Cox, if you could just hold that gun up and show it to the jury. And if it helps you to stand up, you could do that too.
You want me to walk around?
They've already seen it.
They've already seen it.
Yeah, just hold it up for
They're
them.
nodding. I think that, I'm sure they appreciate your offer. Now, Dr. Cox, and you can put it down, thank you. When you had that gun on August, in the beginning of August of 2019, and the defendant took it from you, did it have all those various safety mechanisms on it?
No, sir, it did not.
Judge, I apologize, I forgot to hand up S-191,
What?
so I am going to hand that up and ask if that could be identified at this time.
This?
Or should be moved into evidence at this time.
I think it's already in evidence. S-191?
Yes, it is in evidence.
It is, it's in evidence.
Dr. Cox, I'm going to ask you S-191, if you could open that and take out what's in that bag. What is that?
It is a gun case.
And that's the gun case you indicated earlier. It didn't come with the gun, but you bought it on your own.
I bought it on my own.
Now, would it be typical for you to travel from North Carolina to New Jersey, if you had the gun with you, to have it in that case?
Yes, sir.
Would you have that case inside anything else when you would travel?
I have a backpack
Did you-
that I would have it in that contains, for instance, the gun cleaning equipment and then earphones that are to be used when you do target shooting.
Was there anything else in there? Did you ever carry ammunition?
Yes, there'd be ammunition in there as well, yes.
Now, have you, having owned that gun for a number of years, have you actually shot that gun?
Yes, sir, I have.
Can you describe for the jury, when you would get to, for example, a shooting range, what would be the steps that you would take to prepare that gun to shoot?
So, there would be a table out at the range, and so we have,
Object for relevance?
What's the relevance, Mr. Shellhorn?
Judge, state of mind is an issue in this case, and certainly this is the gun that the state is alleging was used in the shooting. I think the process that would go into shooting the gun by someone who has actual knowledge of shooting the gun is relevant.
I'll allow it, overruled.
I should answer?
Yes, go ahead, you can answer, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank
thank you,
Dr.
sir.
Cox, don't ask me, ask the judge.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, sir.
Yes, no, it's all right, no
I'm
worries.
sorry.
Yes, you
I
can
won't- I
answer.
won't do that again to you.
It's okay. Go ahead, you can answer
I
the
can
question.
answer now.
Yes, you
So there
can.
would be a table there, and there were multiple people there shooting, and there would be a range officer, and the officer would give us certain commands about what to do with the gun, reminding us always to put the gun going downrange, and they would tell us when we could put the clip in, and when the range was hot, and when the range was cold.
Backing up just a little bit then, when you would get there to the range and you were going to shoot the gun, when you arrived there, would it have that orange plastic magazine still in the gun? Or
Yes,
would you
sir. Yes, sir, it would.
And so you would have to remove that?
Yes, sir.
What's the process that goes into removing that orange plastic clip from the gun?
Well, on the side of the gun, there's a little button that lets the clip come out, so you'd have to push that button to get the clip to come out.
Judge, if I could just approach and
Sure, go ahead.
I'm sure you can't hold this up at the same time, but I'm gonna ask if you can point out, do you see where that would be?
It's over on the other side.
It's on the other side. And can you point out to the jury the general area on the other side where that would be?
So it'd be on this side, on the other side, so you could take your thumb and you could push that and it would drop the clip out.
And do you have S202 in front of you there? I think it's this right here.
Yes, it
Can
is.
you just open that up? Does that look like your orange clip?
Absolutely.
So where would that go, or where would that fall out of?
So that would fall out here.
And the purpose of that is what?
Safety.
So you would have to take that out of the gun before you could load bullets?
Oh, absolutely, yes, sir.
When you would typically get to the range, Dr. Cox, would you have bullets loaded into the magazine, or would you have to do that when you got to the range to shoot?
I usually carried 1 or 2 magazines in this case, were in the zipper thing. So I may have 1 magazine that was loaded and the other magazine I would have to load.
And I'll just ask you if you could look at S-177, which is one of those folders in front of you, or envelopes in front of you.
I got a 178 and a 181.
I'm sorry, 178. Does that appear to be one of the magazines for your gun?
Yes, sir.
And are there bullets in that right now?
Yes, sir, there are.
Do you recall if there were bullets in that magazine when you gave it to Michael Barison?
There would have been, one of the magazines, there were two magazines, one of them would surely have had the bullets in it, the other one may not have had.
You can put that back in the, now you indicated it may be, you would typically have ammunition, not in that case that's in front of you, that's S-191, but in your backpack in your car?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what kind of ammunition you would typically buy?
It would be 9mm.
And would you buy a particular brand or something else?
No, sir. Because all I was doing was target shooting, I bought the cheapest bullets that were out there. In North Carolina, you can buy bullets at various different places, so if I came across some, I would buy them.
Judge, if I can approach again?
Sure.
Dr. Cox, I'm going to show you what's been marked as S-190. And I'll leave that if you could just take that out. Do you recognize S-190?
I know what it is. Yes, sir. It's a box of bullets.
Do you know if that box of bullets was yours or not?
No, sir, I do not know.
Did you give any bullets or ammunition to Michael Barisone in a box or that sort of?
Absolutely, sir, I did not.
All right, you can put that back in the envelope. Thank you. Doctor, I'm going to ask you some questions about August of 2019.
August when?
Of 2019.
19?
2019. I think you indicated that you knew of Lauren Kanarek and Rob Goodwin through your association with Michael Barisone.
Yes, sir.
Did you have any personal knowledge of whatever agreements or arrangements they had with Michael Barisone?
Yes, sir.
What was your personal knowledge?
The small bit of knowledge that I had was that Michael had an arrangement with Lauren and her family that.
Objection, Judge, it's got to be hearsay.
Where did you acquire your knowledge from, Dr. Cox?
Where did I
Yeah,
get it?
did you hear it from
From
someone?
Michael Barisone.
It's not hearsay, comes
I
from the
withdraw my
defendant.
objection.
Well, it's hearsay, but there's a exception to the hearsay rule. 803B would let it in, B1 in particular. Go ahead, I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead, ask the question again, Mr. Shellhorn.
Dr. Cox, did you have conversations with Michael Barisone about the nature of the business relationship he had with Lauren Kanarek or Robert Goodwin or their family?
Yes, sir.
What was your understanding from the defendant of that relationship?
Lauren had several horses there that she was working with Michael Barisone, and my understanding was that they exchanged part of that board cost for Rob to do some work at Michael's property.
And did you observe around the property what some of that work was?
Yes, sir, I did.
And in general terms, what did that consist of?
It consisted of, in the stable, some new wiring, new lights, and putting in a ceiling in that stable. And in the home down near the street, working on the cellar that was there to produce some new bedrooms and some new plumbing there.
Do you remember when you came back to New Jersey in August of 2019? What day?
It would either have been a Thursday or a Friday.
And if I told you it was approximately August 2nd,
What
does
day
that
is that?
sound? I think it was Friday.
Objection leading.
It is a little bit leading, Mr.
I'm just trying to
Shellhorn.
refresh your memory, Judge. I
Well, do you have something
can withdraw.
other than your own memory you can refresh her memory with?
Could I ask the court to take judicial notice of,
What's the date?
I'm just double checking so I make the record clear, Your Honor, that August. August 2nd was a Friday, Judge, according to the calendar on my computer.
Yes, I will take, I have a computer as well. I see a calendar, and it is, August 2nd was a Friday.
Does that sound generally consistent with your
Yes.
recollection, Doctor?
Yes, sir, that would be.
When you arrived back to the property on that date, what was your observation about the state of people and things going on at the property?
It was a very tense situation. People were worried, unsure about what was going to be happening. People were hesitant about kind of some goings and comings. But generally, everybody was upset.
When you got back to the property, did you know all of the specific details of what had been going on, or was that just basically your general impression when you got here?
I didn't know all the details, but I understood that there was conflict between Michael Barisone and Lauren Kanarek.
Now, over the next several days from the time you got there, would you say that things got better, got worse, or stayed the same?
Oh, no, sir, they got much, much worse. Day after day after day.
Were you ever present at the property when Michael Barisone's lawyer came?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall if you were a party to or a part of any conversation or meeting he would have had with the lawyer?
Yes, sir.
And without getting into the specifics of what anyone said during that meeting, what was your general impression of the purpose for the meeting?
Objection, Judge, it has to be based on.
Yeah, it is based on hearsay. Where did the meeting take place, Ms. Cox?
It took place in the club room at the stables.
Were you present?
Yes, sir, I was
All right,
present.
who else was present?
Michael was there, I believe Mary Haskins was there, the lawyer was there, and it could have been that Mary Haskins' father was there, because he had come up to the stables.
All right. Approximately how long was the conversation?
The conversation was probably half an hour, 45 minutes.
All right, thank you.
During the
Mr. Shellhorn, I think I'm going to sustain
I'm moving on.
any further questioning about it would elicit hearsay statements of others, so it's classic hearsay and therefore not admissible.
Judge, can I get a date for that meeting conversation?
Do you recall the date, Dr. Cox?
Oh, absolutely not, sir. No.
Go ahead, Mr. Shellhorn.
Now, Doctor, I want to ask you some specific questions about that conversation that you had with Michael Barisone about the gun. Do you recall where on the property that conversation happened?
I do.
Where was that?
It was in the long aisle of all of those stables up near the wash stalls outside of Don Devon's stable.
Judge, I would like to show a photo. It's S319. I don't believe that has been identified or moved into evidence at this time. I apologize, it has. I think it was with the last witness.
Yes, 319 is in evidence.
Doctor, I think that may be on your screen in front of you as well, too, if that's easier for you to see.
That is easier, yes, sir.
What is S319 a picture of?
This is a picture of the long aisle on the right-hand side of the stables, where the majority of the stables were.
And what's at the far end of the aisle there?
So at the far end, there are 2 wash stalls on the right, and where you see that kind of black hole, it goes out into a docking bay.
And at that end of the aisle, if you were to take a left into that hallway, where does that go?
So when you got to the end of this aisle, if you went left,
Yes.
you went into the indoor arena,
And the clubhouse was right in front of that?
and the clubhouse was in front of that.
Where was the stall where Don Devone, your horse, was boarded?
His would have been, so if you're walking down this hallway, his would have been the last stall before you get to the wash stalls.
Now, is that the area that you were in when you had that conversation with the defendant?
Yes, sir.
Did he come and approach you, or did you go and approach him?
He came and approached me.
And do you remember approximately what day that was?
It would have been on either like Friday or Saturday. It was late in the evening when that happened.
Do you recall generally what the defendant asked you or said to you?
Yes, the conversation started out just generally about what was going on, and then he asked me if I had brought my gun with me on this trip, and I said I had. He wanted to see it.
Had he ever asked you to see your gun before?
He had not asked me to see it. We had talked about it, but he had not asked to actually see it before.
What did you do after he asked you that?
He wanted to see it, so I got the gun from my car in the case that you saw here, and we looked at it
And where did you look at it with the defendant?
in front of Don Devone's stall.
Was anyone else in the area at that time?
No, sir, there were not.
You said that that was at nighttime.
It was late in the evening.
Can you give an approximate time? When you say late in the evening, what does that mean?
Around midnight or after.
Did he know where the handgun was, or did he just ask you to go get it?
Well, how would he know that?
That's what I'm asking.
I mean, if he said anything about it, like go get it from the car or words to that effect,
Did he, yes, I'll rephrase the question, Judge.
please do that.
Did he ask you specifically to go get it out of the car?
Yes.
When you brought it back in, you had said that it was still in that case?
Yes, sir.
And were the 2 magazines in the case with it?
Yes.
The orange plastic clip was in the handgun itself?
Yes, sir.
And I think you said that possibly one of the clips was fully loaded?
Yes.
Do you recall how much ammunition or how many bullets one of those magazines held?
7.
But your recollection is that one of them would have been empty?
It could have been empty, or it could have just had 1 or 2 bullets in it.
Did he give you the handgun back after he looked at it?
No, sir, he did not.
Did he open the case and look at the handgun itself, or did he just look at the case?
We looked at the case and opened it up to see the handgun and then closed it back up.
Do you remember if he took the handgun out of the case at all?
No. No, he did not take it out of the case.
Did you see where he took it specifically?
Yes, sir. He took it into the club room.
Did you watch where he went from there?
No, sir, I did not.
Did he tell you what he was going to do with it?
No, sir, he did not.
Did you ask him what he was going to do with it?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you have any concerns with giving it to him at that time?
Absolutely, sir, I did not at that time.
Now, I'll draw your attention to August 7th, which is a Wednesday. Do you remember what you were doing? Let me ask you this. Were you still at the farm on Wednesday, August 7th?
Yes, sir, I was.
And do you recall what you were doing that morning?
Yes, sir. I was at that long table that we had talked about before. I was sitting at the end of the long table that was next to the front windows doing some work on my computer, my laptop.
Mr. Shellhorn,
Yes, Judge.
do you know how much longer you're going to be approximately?
10 to 15 minutes. So I could either finish now or I could,
Well, it's 4:35 now.
I think either way we'll probably need
Tomorrow
to
anyway,
finish
so we got to
tomorrow,
do
so-
calls. All right.
But I don't anticipate taking a long time to finish with the
All right.
document.
I don't want to go too much over. It was just 5 minutes or so. I'd say we could finish, but 10 or
On my
15.
last page, but I don't want to make any promises.
No, I understand. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll take our evening recess now. It's a little bit past 4:30. And there may be days when we stay a little bit later to finish up, but it's too early in the trial to push it. So we'll break now. We'll come back tomorrow. Please be here around 8:30 or so we can get started as close to 9 as possible. All right, please don't discuss the case. Have a good evening, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Can I ask the prosecutor who he's going to call tomorrow?
Sure. You can step down, Dr. Cox. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you
All
very
right,
much.
so I'm sure Mr. Shellhorn may want to speak to you, but we'll figure we'll get started close to 9 o'clock, so
Sir, I will
maybe
be-
8:30. All right, we'll see you then. Nice seeing you again, Tom.
You too.
Officer, just have her stay down here until the jurors leave, if you would. It's Dr. Cox. Yeah.
The prosecutor guys.
Okay. Mr. Shellhorn, what's the batting order for tomorrow?
Judge, I anticipate we would finish with Dr. Cox.
Yes.
I have Vanessa Medrano Cortez, the DCP&P worker,
All right.
is slated to be here in the morning, and I anticipate Ms. Kanarek will be called tomorrow.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you.
Oh, Judge,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett just reminded me, I didn't want to give Mr. Hardin and Ms. Gray the okay to be released. I think they're finished at this point, so I was going to tell them they're free to travel back to Florida, and then if there's a need to recall them by the defense, I assume they'll make those arrangements.
All right, yeah, I think that's the best way to proceed, especially since we're in the middle of Dr. Cox's testimony and we're gonna hear from Ms. Kanarek.
Do we have an estimate as to when you're going to finish your case? Things have gone on a bit.
Judge, based on where we are right now, somewhat dependent on cross-examination, obviously.
Of course.
I can make the representation to the court that the doctor from the hospital has office days on Mondays and Thursdays. So he had asked, so he didn't have to postpone any surgeries or operations, which would be on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Fridays, if he could be called on one of those 2 days.
On
So
what days?
If he could be called on a Monday or a Thursday.
All right.
So I have him on standby.
Have him
this
here for Thursday.
Assuming that,
And where does he work, at Morristown
Yes.
Memorial?
and so I guess my point being, if we don't get to him on Thursday, my anticipation would be I would at least need to call him on Monday, depending.
All right, well, we'll probably get to him, we'll try to fit him in on Thursday. If we have to take him a little bit out of order, we'll take him a little bit out of order, just to get it finished.
Should I tell him, I'll coordinate that with him.
Just coordinate, tell him Thursday, and we'll see where we stand tomorrow at close of business to see who's on the stand and how much longer we anticipate things going.
Yes.
So other than the doctor,
But I don't anticipate, beyond that, I think I only have 3 other witnesses,
All right,
or, no.
all right,
My
so,
co-counsel is telling me I have grossly, 5,
yeah, all right.
but I don't think that they're,
So, probably won't finish this week, but maybe early next week you'll
I think we'll
finish.
be very close to finishing this week.
Yeah, well,
Over the next
again, it
week is
depends on the
best.
cross-examination of the witnesses, but either at the end of this week or early next week. All right, but we'll try to get the doctor in on Thursday.
Can I collect this evidence, Judge?
Yes, go ahead. All right, Mr. Grasso, have all the jurors left? All right, very good. People observing the trial can now leave. We'll see you tomorrow.